this is a skills-based session, and I really want to hear from you how you'd like it to be run. My intention was that although there's no magic, an automatic way of saying, okay, we'll sit together for 45 minutes, an hour, and hey, presto, you'll all be able to bench. I wanted to actually have a hands-on hour whereby we actually get into the nitty-gritty of the benching. So it's not a whole big discussion. It's about drawing up the map of what benching looks like and getting into it so that we can try and make it work. Does that sound okay? I'll share screen as well, so that we'll have the benching up so that everybody can see. But why don't, just before we start, you tell me if there's anything specific you'd like to get out of the session. Anyone, anything?
I should go with the flow.
You're on mute.
I'm saying that at the moment I get embarrassed by my 7-year-old son who benches and I can't really bench. So I'd love to be able to keep up.
Everybody else kind of share that sentiment? Is there anything else that anyone's looking for? Just so that we don't miss it. Edward, are you okay with that? I imagine you've sat around many tables where there's been benching over the years. Edward, you're on mute. Oh, there we go.
No, I can bench, but I'm sure there's much I can learn.
Okay. So I hope it won't be boring, and by all means tell me if it is, or leave and say this wasn't for me. I came to spy out the land, but actually didn't need to stay.
It depends what you introduce to it.
Well, let's see. I will introduce your energy, hopefully just reflecting everyone's vibe, but we'll try and navigate benching as if it was a real occasion. And I'm going to start by sharing screen and showing you the edition of the bencher that I'm going to use right now, which is called Bench and Sing. Can you see it here?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to actually share the Bench and Sing in a moment. You'll be able to see inside. And if you're suitably impressed, you feel this would be useful for you or others around your table, then you can order a copy or several copies from, you'll see in the at the top here, tribeuk.com. If I just go back a moment, this is how you'd get to it. It's not available on Amazon, I just checked, but tribeuk.com. You then go to this tab, Tribe Resources, and select Tribe Resources for sale. And there it is, Bench and Sing. $2.49 a pop. Okay, so that's what we're going to be using now. And I'm going to just stop share and get onto the actual book itself.
Ellie, is it okay to make notes in our own books, or should we not do that because it's a book?
Of course you can. If you have a bencher that you're already familiar with and like to use, for sure. Make any annotations that you'd like to. Okay. And share screen once more. Sorry, I know share screen kind of blocks the vision a little bit, but at least we've all got a text. And here we go. So, firstly, a very, very brief overview, just to put everything into context. There are essentially 4 sections. There are 4 blessings to benching. And that's before we get to this introduction. I'm talking about in the core section of benching itself and how they came about. So I'm going to scroll, but we'll come back to this. This first blessing over here, and by the way, you'll see shortly, the reason why I like this version, this edition of the bencher, is because it's very beautifully laid out. It's friendly for adults and children. It's engaging. It also has Hebrew and transliteration. So this, can you see my cursor moving around? This Baruch is blessing number 1 of 4. And it's called the blessing of Hazan. Here we go. Right at the bottom, it finishes off, Baruch atah Hashem Hazan et hakol. That's where it gets its name from. The bracha, the blessing of Hazan. What is the blessing of Hazan? Who introduced it? It goes all the way back to Moses and the manna falling from heaven, this miraculous food that somehow managed to be there every day, and 2 portions on a Friday for the Jewish people so they didn't starve in the desert. And Moses said to the people, we have to acknowledge this. We have to say thank you to the person who's creating this delicious food for us. So he introduced this blessing or some form of it, which was later formulated further and then became part of the benching. In fact, not just part of the benching, but the very opening of grace after meals. That is blessing number 1, Hazan. Here we have, moving along in Jewish history, the next
Sorry, so Hazan means food?
nourishment. Yes. Okay. The second blessing is, by the way, we say mizanot. So zon, mizanot, it's sharing a root there. Zon is food or feeding or some sort of nourishment. Here we come to the second blessing on page 12, Nodeh Lacha. And this, once again, from the way it ends, is a blessing called the blessing of Aretz, land. We'll just get to it. We'll see how it ends in a moment. And the reason why we have this is because when Joshua took over the leadership, the mantle of leadership of the Jewish people from Moses, and he led the Jewish people into the land of Israel, he wanted to compose a blessing, not just for nourishment, but for food that grows, the agriculture and the beauty of the land of Israel. And that's where this blessing comes from. So we're just going to get to the end of it here. You see, Baruch atah Adonai ala aretz va'al hamazon. It's very, very nice to see how he's taking it a stage further. Not only is he blessing God for the mazon, which is very similar to hazan, the food, but now it's connected to the land itself and appreciating that the Jewish people have their own land from which to enjoy food. The third blessing is probably amongst the most famous of the most famous parts and the most familiar parts of benching. That's this is attributed to Solomon, to King David and to King Solomon. So father and son composed this blessing and it found its way. It's short, it's sharp, it's powerful, it's very, very beautiful. And in a way, that's the middle of the benching, and it kind of brings everyone together in the same way that Jerusalem for us is the center of our universe and is a melting pot for so many people to come together. That's the role Jerusalem plays in our lives, and that's the role this blessing about Jerusalem plays in the benching. Finally, we come to the fourth blessing, which is called Hatov Vahametiv. And this is the latest blessing to be added. So benching is all chronological in terms of the order of blessings. It happened around the year of 132, 136, so the 2nd century, when a man called Shimon bar Kokhba led a revolt against the Roman authorities. This is somewhat tied into the Haggadah as well, when Rabbi Akiva and the other rabbis are famously sitting together on Seder night. It's around that time of the Bar Kokhba revolt. And this final blessing, which starts with Ha'elavino Malkeinu Adireno Boreno Gohalenu, etc., is called Hatov Vahametiv. Interestingly, once again, it takes, although you see a little bit over here, Hu Hativ, Hu Metiv, Hu Yetiv Lanu, where my cursor is, and I'm highlighting, most of these blessings get their name from the way they end. So you see the Tov and the goodness coming in right at the end of the blessing, in the same way that Eretz came in at the end of the second blessing. Before that, sorry, if we're working backwards, Bonei Yerushalayim came in at the end of the third blessing, and Hazan et Takol came in at the end of the first blessing. So it's almost a case of having to get to the end of the blessing to understand why the blessing got its name. And that is an overview of benching. Now, it doesn't mean that all the other parts are not important, but they were added on. Once we had a framework of these 4 blessings, then we added in a harachaman, a remembrance and a connection to Elijah the prophet, a prayer for the Mashiach. Harachaman, limot, HaMashiach, and everyone goes, yay, etc., etc. So they were all added in at other times around this main structure of the 4 blessings. Now, let's go back all the way to the beginning. The first 3, so Hazon et Hakol, the second one, which is Nod Elachan, is about the land, introduced by Joshua, and Uvenei Yerushalayim. These are mandatory. They are biblically ordained. We have very few blessings and prayers that are actually, that we're instructed about, that are obligations from the Torah itself. Most of our blessings and prayers were introduced by the sages. Now, that's important because they had the authority to build on the 5 books of Moses, which is when I refer to the Torah itself, that's what I'm talking about. And the rabbis expounded on that. If we didn't have the oral law, we wouldn't know, for example, what to do with tefillin, because we only have a few words about tefillin in the entire Torah. Ukeshartam la'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha. You should bind them on your arm and put them on your head. I count 8 words there. That's all we know about tefillin. We wouldn't know they have to be boxes. We wouldn't know they have to be black. We wouldn't know how to wrap them, where to put them on your head. All of that is introduced to us by the rabbis. It's the same thing with prayer and blessings. However, we are told in the book of Deuteronomy in Devarim, towards the end of the Torah, v'achalta v'savata, you shall eat and you shall be satiated, uveirachta, and you shall bench, you shall bless. So there's a very, very clear instruction there to eat, to feel satisfied, and then to say thank you. That's what we call a biblically ordained commandment. It's in the 5 books of Moses. It's in a verse of the Torah telling us to bench. However, only the first 3 blessings are involved in that biblical obligation. The 4th that was added following the Bar Kokhba revolt is rabbinic rather than scripturally ordained. The other thing about benching is that we have this introduction, and this is the final piece of introduction before we actually get into it. And over here again, it's about the sages sitting down and saying, when people are together, rather than each one eating on their own and blessing on their own, let's create some kind of connectivity over here. So we can bless God together. And it's a very similar concept to coming to shul. We can pray on our own. We can even pray without Zoom, believe it or not. And that's extremely powerful. But when we do get together, whether that's on Zoom or whether that's in shul, and we have an actual minyan plus, we say, Barov Am Hadrat Melech. The more people there are, the more majestic it is for royalty, for the king, for the one who we're blessing. And so this idea, the notion of benching together came into play, where if one is sitting with others, they have an introduction called Rabbatayna Varech. As soon as we have 3 people sitting together, they need to be of the same gender. That's when Rabbatayna Varech occurs. And the 3 people have to be over bar or bat mitzvah. So for example, if we have 3 men sitting together, then they do the introduction. If we have 2 men and 1 woman, they don't. If you have 3 women and 1 man, the women could lead because there are 3 women sitting together. Now, this is a whole discussion about who leads the benching, which is not what we're going to go into this evening, but suffice it to say that there is plenty to rely on for both men and women to lead the benching. However, it is an instruction for men to lead. There's a discussion whether women can or must. Nonetheless, it's something that everyone should familiarize themselves with and can take the opportunity to do if you so wish. And that is exactly where we're going to start just after this on page 6, which would come as the very, 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 very first thing. And here begins our practical experience. So let's just imagine now that it's Shabbat or Yom Tov. Before we enter into the introduction, the stage of Rabbatayna Varech, we would come to Shir HaMa'alot. Shir HaMa'alot is only said on special occasions where it would be classified as a festival or a Shabbat. So every Shabbat we sing Shir HaMa'alot, both in the evening and during the day. By all means, by the way, jump in, guys, ask questions, comment, disagree, expand the discussion. On Yom Tov, it would be once again a Yom Tov meal at night during the day, and also on occasions like Rosh Chodesh, which are festive, or Chol HaMoed, when we have the intermediate days on Pesach and Sukkot, you would also say Shir HaMa'alot. Therefore, when it's a regular day, we don't say Shir HaMa'alot. But when it's a special day, we always begin with Shir HaMa'alot. I will sing the most regular tune, but there are plenty of them. Gary, a question?
When we do Shir HaMa'alot, is that also you have to have the rule of 3, or you do that on your own?
Thank you for checking on that. Shir HaMa'alot is you can do on your own. The only thing you would do with a minimum of 3 from the same gender is the introduction, which we'll do in a minute. But I've stopped here because actually this is pre-introduction. This is like, come on, everyone, let's get in the mood. And then this is like a call to action. Shir HaMa'alot suggests to everyone that we're going to bench. And only afterwards do we start the formal benching. So this is an introduction, and it goes like this. I'm recording this so I can share the recording afterwards for you to recall and follow. I'll go between, is it all right to go in the English? Sorry, in the Hebrew, or do you specifically want the transliteration? Does it matter?
Hebrew, please.
Hebrew. Okay, Hebrew it is.
Hebrew, please. Yeah.
Fab. Okay. Shir hamalot b'shuv Adonai et shivat Zion hayinu kecholmim az yimale sechok pinu ushonenu rina az yomru v'hagoyim higdil Adonai lasot im eile Higdil Adonai lasot imanu, hayinu semeichim, shuva Adonai et shivitenu, kafikim b'negev, hazorim b'dima, b'rina yiktoru, holoch yelech uvacha, no semeshech hazora, boyavo verina, no se alumotav. Tehilat Adonai yedaber pi, vivarech kol basar shem kodsho leolam va'ed, va'anachnu nevarech ya, me'ata v'yad olam, hallelujah. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasto, mi yemalel gvurot Adonai, yashmiya kol tehilato. This is a chapter from Psalms, from King David's book of Psalms. It's chapter 120. It was almost chosen as Israel's national anthem. It speaks about Hayinu Kacholmim right at the top over here. We were like dreamers, returning to Shivat Zion, returning to Zion. This is a great dream for our people as individuals and as a nation. And over here, we have Hazorim Bedima. I sow with tears, but I will reap with joy. Isn't that beautiful? Kind of sums up the Jewish approach to life. Things may be tough on the journey, but Barina Yiksaru will get there in the end and we'll celebrate. It's worth it. And that kind of sets the tone for benching. That's why I say it's a rallying call for everyone to come around the table. Now, you can put this to whatever tune you like. I sung the most traditional one, but you can go like, nai, 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 shir hamalot, na, 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 na. You can put it to match of the day. Shir hamalot, b'shuv Adonai, yeshivat Zion. Whatever gets people in the mood. That's what it's really about. Let's move on to the next bit. Okay. Invitation to bench. Everyone okay at this stage? Now, there are a few different ways of doing this, and they've chosen to print two. We're going to stick to the right-hand side, but this is how you would do it as where I'm highlighting. This is how you would do it as a woman. Chaveratayna varech. That's how a woman would lead on the left-hand side, okay? You can also do this in Yiddish. Rabboisai, nivel and Bentching. All we're saying over here, Rabbatayna varech, Chavaratayna varech, or Rabbosai, nivel and Bentching, however else one wants to say it. You could say in English, come on everyone, let's bench. That's what we're actually doing. And then they all respond. Yihisheim Adonai mevarach mi'atam yadolem. This is for males and females. And by the way, if a male is leading the benching, then the women don't have to refer to the left-hand side. And on the next line over here, it's set wherever I'm highlighting. It's only if a woman is leading the benching, then they go to the left-hand side. But once a male is leading, then the women say the same things as the men. And
so if you're leading, you say Rabbatayna varech, yeah.
Exactly.
Do you also say it when everybody else says it at the same time? Yeshem Adonai mevarech.
You normally wait. I'd love to do a role play here. You would wait for everyone to respond, and then you would repeat after them. Amit, do you want to do that with me? Why don't you give it a go? Rabbatai Nevarech. And then we'll respond.
רבותיי נברך.
Give us a chance now. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach Me'ata V'yad Olam. You, Amit. Yehi.
יהי שם אדוני מברך מעתה ועד עולם.
Great. Bereshut.
Okay, carry on. ברשות רבותיי.
That's it. You would stop there. And if it's a woman, she would say Bereshut Chavarotai. Yes. And then you carry on with Nevarech.
ברשות רבותיי. ברשות רבותיי שאכלנו משלו.
Can you see the word Nevarech at the end of that line?
ברשות רבותיי נברך שאכלנו משלו.
Exactly. The only difference between a man and woman leader is this word Rabbatai / Chavarotai. But all the other words would be said by either. So you would exactly what you've just done now. You would say Bereshut Rabbatai and then jump in on the last word of the line Nevarech. Everyone would say that. Everyone who's leading, that is. Is that clear? Exact. I'm just explaining what you did. You did it correctly. Bereshut Rabbatai, and then this word. I'm not sure if you can see it when I highlight the words. Nevarech. Can you see that? Amit?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, sorry. ברשות רבותיי נברך שאכלנו משלו.
Exactly. And then we respond, everyone, Baruch she'achalnu mishelo uvetuvo chayinu. And then you repeat, Amit, Baruch, at the bottom.
ברוך שאכלנו משלו ובטובו חיינו, ברוך הוא וברך שמו.
Exactly. That's how you lead the benching. There's only one change. We do this introduction with 3, and we would remain with it. We would remain with this introduction if we have between 3 and 9. But once we have 10 people of the same gender sitting around the table, we add in the word in brackets, which is Eloheinu. Yes. So we would be praising God to a higher degree by adding in that word Eloheinu. You see? So now, Gary, you've got a question, or do you want to volunteer to lead? Not yet, almost.
So just to understand, sorry, going back to the first line. So if it was like, let's say 3 boys, 3 women together, then I would start with the Rabbatai, and then the women would follow with Havaratai.
No, sorry, thank you for asking this question. I want to clarify. Whoever leads the benching, it goes in that gender. It is most common for a man to lead the benching. Yes, and as I say, there's a wider discussion to be had on this. But generally, what I'm trying to say tonight is that this particular part of benching would most times be done by a man. Women should feel empowered to do it, especially if they're in a women's only setting, like when we do women's Hallel, for example, or Rosh Chodesh, and they should know how to do it for themselves as well. But Gary, if you're leading benching at home around your Shabbat table, and you have you've got 4 other guys with you who are over bar mitzvah, and there's some women there as well. This is how it would sound. You'd go Rabbatai Nevarech. Everyone together would respond, men and women. Yehi Shem Mevorach Me'ata. Yes.
Right. Okay. So in my situation, because my mother's over, right? So it'd be my mother, Gabby, and Raheli, and I and Ari, therefore, in the minority. So it would be the women that would lead.
Yes. Some people wouldn't do that. Some people would say, on this occasion, we do not have 3 men. Even though there are 3 women, we are not going to do this section of the benching. Let's go straight through from the end of Shir HaMa'alot to Baruch, which is going to be the first blessing. Others would say, no, we have 3 women, let them do it. And this is the rabbinic debate about women and the introduction part of benching.
What about the washing up?
That, I would say there's no debate. Men definitely have to do it.
Being very careful there, Ellie.
I come from a home where there was only my mum and one sister. We were all boys. Gary, I'm going to come back to do another demo. Edward, I don't know if you're happy to lead the demo in just a moment, but Ruth has a question.
I just wanted to ask one question. If there were 2 men and 3 women, as Gary is suggesting, can the man still bench?
The man can definitely bench, but he can't lead.
But he can't lead. Interesting. So there have to be 3, where there are 3 of one sex, that lot bench. One of them will lead.
Yes, but everyone benches together. And as I
Yes,
said,
yeah.
it's most common for men to lead in a situation where you have a choice between men and women. That's just the tradition. Certainly.
But taking Gary's situation, 3 women and 2 men, who would bench?
I would, yeah, not a man.
Not a man, exactly. So it would be the women then.
Yeah.
A woman.
Yeah. But Gary would follow them with the same.
Right. Okay.
And sorry, Ellie,
You're on mute, which is why others are jumping in. Amit will ask this question and then unmute yourself in the meantime when we're coming to you next. Go on, Amit.
my question is a bit stupid, but the Eloheinu again, just remind me. I know you were saying that, but I was trying to find it on my own bencher and this one, so I could.
With 10 plus. By the way, if you've all got your own benches, I can close the share screen and we can see each other.
No, it's better because this one's really clear and it's not as clear on mine. So.
Fine. Okay, so Eloheinu is when you have 10 plus, 10 men. Yeah, you're sitting at a shul dinner. And I come over to you and say, Amit, we've been working on benching together. Wouldn't you like to lead this dinner benching this Friday night? You go, yes, sure, I'm up for it. I'd give you a cup of wine, because when there are 10 people plus 10 plus benching together, you don't say Eloheinu, you fill up a cup of wine and you hold it whilst you say this introduction. So there's a bit of hokey-cokey. We're going to do a full demo in just a minute after Ruth's question.
So you're saying that you wouldn't say Eloheinu, even though there's more than 10 of you there?
You would. That's when you say Eloheinu.
You would say it, yeah.
I just wanted to clarify. So if there are 2 couples, so 2 men and 2 women, you would leave out this section altogether. Okay.
Perfect. Exactly. You've got to have 3 to play the game.
I think in Sephardi households, if there were 3 women and 2 men, they wouldn't leave that. They would leave it out, because I don't think in many Sephardi households that they recognise the primacy of women in this situation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Ellie.
Yes.
Sorry, another question. I think this is kind of a pretty traditional one. Yeah. And it's a little bit, this is what's been throwing me. So it says, Rabbatai Nevarech, Yeshem Adonai Nevarech Me'ata V'ad Olam. And then it says, Berishut Moranan V'Rabbanan V'Rabbatai.
Slightly different version.
Okay.
I also say that, by the way. That's how I was brought up.
Okay, so it's just an old-fashioned one, right? Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But you could just start Nevarech, yeah?
Yeah, you got to read you got to get used to reading what you have in front.
Yeah. Nevarech Shachan Mishelo.
Now,
Okay.
where's my Kiddush cup? Here we go. I'm going to do a quick demo. Edward, I'm not sure if you want to follow as another example after me, and then we'll move on to the first blessing. So, this is a full demo for 3 people, followed by a demo with 10 people, and then if Edward or anyone else wants to just have a quick practice, let's do that, and we'll head on to the next bit. Rabbatai Nevarech.
Yeshem Adonai Nevarech Me'ata V'ad Olam.
Bereshut. Rabbatai Nevarech She'achalnu Mishelo.
Baruch She'achalnu Mishelo V'Tova Chayinu.
Baruch She'achalnu Mishelo V'Tova Chayinu. Baruch Hu U'Baruch Shmo. Baruch Atah.
yeah, and then you just kind of.
Now,
We should have all joined in there.
Yeah.
Here comes 10. Filling up my wine. Rabbatai Nevarech.
Yeshem Adonai Nevarech
Yeshem Adonai Nevarech Me'ata V'ad Olam.
Adonai Nevarech Me'ata V'ad Olam. Bereshut Rabbatai Nevarech Eloheinu she'achanu mishalah.
Baruch Eloheinu
Baruch
Baruch
Eloheinu
she'achanu
she'achanu
mishalom,
hayinu.
Exactly. Baruch Eloheinu. You respond. She'achanu mishalah v'tovach hayinu.
Baruch Eloheinu she'achanu.
You just say that one.
Huh?
You just say that once, and I repeat after you. Baruch Eloheinu she'achanu mishalah v'tovach hayinu, and then I say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shema, Baruch Ata. I don't put the cup down at that point. If I'm benching with the cup, it remains in my hand until
Yeah.
after the blessing for Jerusalem, after Uvenei
Oh.
Yerushalayim.
Oh, okay.
After Jerusalem.
There is also a little tradition that when one says Baruch Eloheinu, they stand up a little bit. So I'd go like this. Baruch Eloheinu, not properly. I wouldn't stand like that. I just go off my chair. Baruch Eloheinu, like a nod to the Almighty. Yeah, Baruch Eloheinu as a mark of respect.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else want to run that through as the leader? Edward, I kept on saying you might.
I don't mind.
Yeah.
You're going for Edward or Andrew?
Edward,
I don't mind.
Age before beauty.
So we're going back to Eloheinu or without Eloheinu?
Whichever one you choose. That's whichever one.
Okay, Rabbatai Nevarech.
Yehi Shem Adonai Berech.
Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarech me'ata v'ad olam.
Yishem Adonai Nevarech mi'ata v'yad olam. B'yeshus Maron v'Banon v'Rabbatai Nevarech. Shachanu Shalom.
Baruch
Baruch she'achanu mishalo
Baruch Shachanu
v'tuvo
Shalom
chayinu.
v'tuva Hayinu. Baruch Hu u'Mevarach Shemo.
Baruch Ata. Okay, great.
Baruch Hu Baruch Shema.
No, you don't, Andrew. You wouldn't say Baruch Hu. Baruch
Oh, I
Shema.
don't say that bit. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, it is that. It
It
does
says
say-
in my book we all say it together.
Oh, really?
Does it? Oh, it doesn't in the Art Scroll Siddur.
Okay.
Again, variation, the spice of life.
Ellie,
Go on.
can we do it one more time? Because it's a bit that I fail on all the time. So if
Yeah.
you don't
Go
mind.
for it.
Andrew, you were going to do one.
All right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Rabbi Satan Berech.
Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarech
mi'ata
me'ata
v'yad
v'ad
olam.
olam.
Yehi Shem Adonai Berech. Me'atzah v'yad olam. Bereshus. Me'olam. Berech. She'achanu mishalo.
Baruch Shalom
She'achanu
Shalom
mishalo
v'tuva
v'tuvo chayinu.
And then Baruch She'achanu mishalo v'tuvo chayinu. Baruch Hu Yivarech. Uvarech. Shemo.
Cool.
Yeah. Bit garbled at the end.
We're going to move on to, but to be honest, anyone who wants to have a turn, it's so quick. I think it would help cement the concept. I'll go for it.
All right. Rabbatai Nevarech.
Yishem
Yishem
Adonai
Adonai
Berech
Berech
mi'ata
mi'ata
v'yad
v'ad
olam.
Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarech me'ata v'ad olam. ברשות, נברך שאכלנו משלו.
Baruch
Baruch
she'achanu
She'achanu mishalo v'tuvo chayinu.
ברוך שאכלנו משלו וטובו חיינו. ברוך אתה, ברוך הוא וברוך שמו.
See that no one's going for 10 here. Gary, you up for it?
We're in lockdown.
Ruth, are you keen?
No, my Hebrew is, to read Hebrew is very shaky. I
Okay.
follow, but it's hard to read.
Have they got this? Oh, they've how about this in with the transliteration?
No, I actually find that more confusing. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it can be. Gary? On behalf of Spurs.
Press it. Sorry, didn't realize muted. Rabbatai Nevarech.
Yishem Adonai
יהיה
Mevarech
שם
mi'ata
אדוני
v'yad
מברך
olam.
מעתה ועד עולם.
Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarech me'ata v'ad olam. B'shut Rabbatai Nevarech Eloheinu she'achalanu mishelu.
So,
Baruch
אלוהינו
Shalom
שאכלנו
v'tuvo
משלו
hayinu.
ובטובו.
Gary, can we just break up those words slightly? She'a chalnu. Best way to remember it. She'a chalnu.
Mishalom.
And then Michelle.
She'achalnu. She'achalnu.
Uh-huh. Michelle. And then we'll all respond. Baruch Eloheinu.
Mishalom v'tuvo hayinu.
V'tuvachayinu. You want to make sure the first time one does this, it's not necessarily with 10 people, and you're holding the wine and trying to read the words. Everywhere. But that's great. Really, really fun and really important. By the way, after this session, just to keep in touch, and this has opened it up, but we can continue practicing so that everyone feels they're ready to surprise their family and friends next time. Let's move on, unless anyone else wants to have a turn. Now, I can sing this through for you, and we might sing some bit, but I mean, should we just do the singing and then stop at various points, or not do too much singing?
I learned from you singing, definitely.
Right, let's sing it through. If you want to sing it together with me, that's great. Sing together as if we're benching around the same table.
Yeah.
When it comes to various points, I'll pause and we'll talk.
Are you gonna, Ellie? Are you gonna do a recording, or is this it? Because the other way to learn it afterwards is like just to listen to you and do it on my own. Yeah.
I have a recording, an MP3 that I can send you, which is actually from the Shul CD that we made several years ago.
Oh, I probably got that. But is that the normal one, or is it a special tune?
No, regular. So let me see if I can dig up an email or WhatsApp version of that and just shoot it over.
Okay. Yeah, I probably got the CD somewhere, but
okay. Let me just send my brother Levi a quick message while we're doing this, because maybe by the time we finish in about 15 minutes, he'll send me the link. I'll quickly ask him. Take a quick breather.
Might as well do this then. Rabbi Nevarech. יהיה שם אדוני מברך מעתה ועד עולם. ברשות מרנן ורבנן, I keep on doing this. נברך שאכלנו משלו. נברך שאכלנו ברוך שאכלנו משלו ובטובו חיינו. ברוך הוא וברך שמו.
Yes. As my guitar tutor says, just slow it down.
Yeah. And break it into syllables.
Yeah.
What I find interesting, Ellie, is you can have been saying this for years, as I have, but I've never really stopped to think what each line means. You know, my friends, let us say the blessing. Normally you just go into benching, you don't think about it. So it's very interesting to break it down.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that. It's nice for me to discuss it like this as well. It makes it less robotic. So thank you. Thanks for joining the experience. Here we go. Baruch atah
Adonai
Eloheinu
melech haolam
hazon
v'chein b'chesed rachamim v'naseh lechem ki li'olam chasda u'b'tuvo hagadol El Yaseh Babu Shema Hakadol Joseph Mafinos Lako Umekin Mozom Lachol Priyasov Asher Bara Baruch Ato Adonai Hazan et Hakol.
Taking a leaf out of your book, it's the first time I've realized and registered that actually, I said before, you get to the end of the blessings and you realize why they're named Hazan or Aret, etc., because of the ending. But actually, Zan or Mazon was mentioned 4 times in this paragraph. You don't have to wait till the end to hear it for the first time. The sign-off is very definite. It's
Hazan es hakol.
Why this blessing is called Zan. But it's not the first time it's mentioned. It already comes up in a few lines in. So that's something I've just discovered, or first time I've thought about it.
What's the literal translation of Zan?
Nourishment or food, to feeding. Thank you, God, for feeding everyone. Hazon et hakol. You feed everyone. Does anyone want something else from this paragraph before we move on? Yes, Gary.
So when it doubles back on itself, halfway through, so we go. So I get the run. Kilom hasal. Uv tuvo hagadol tamid lo chasalanu. Can I just go over those 2 lines because they sort of double back?
Sure.
because I always like mumble. That's the mumble bit for me.
Okay. So, Ki le'olam chasta. I'm going to do this really slowly. Uv tuvo hagadol tamid lo lanu va'al yechsar lanu. There is nothing lacking. And it's just a different way of saying this. It's emphasizing the idea that God gives us everything we need. That word chasar means to something's missing or lacking, and there's nothing. Always there for us.
It's a tongue twister because there's Hasar, and then the next line is Yechsar.
Yeah,
Is it different tense?
they come from the same root. Here you have a beautiful
What's the literal translation of each word?
We have never lacked food, nor may we ever lack it.
Ah, right, it's tense.
Yeah, with the yud at the front.
Yeah.
Prefix.
So it's almost like a conversation where someone's saying something and the other people are piping up with or ever.
Yeah, well, we're saying to God, you've always been there for us, and you always will be there for us.
Yeah.
Or you're saying to somebody in a speech, a family member or somebody you're thanking, you've always been there for me. And the thing about you is I trust you so much. I know you always will be there for me. That's essentially what's happening in this first paragraph. And there you have at the end, blessed are you, Lord, who feeds all, Hazan et Hakol, who nourishes everybody. We go straight into the second blessing, Nodeh Lacha. And then it gets interesting because we start adding various bits depending on occasions, but the first two blessings always follow on from each other with no interruption. So, take two. Do. Nodeh Lacha
Eloheinu shen halt
Avotenu
Eret Emda Ohaba Al Chateson Eloheinu Me'eret Mitzrayim.
Let me just pause for a minute. What are we talking about here, Me'eretz Mitzrayim?
From the land of Egypt.
Land of Israel.
Well, we're getting to the land of Israel, Andrew, but we've come from somewhere.
Oh, sorry, my answer is Ryan, Egypt. Sorry.
So thank you so much, God, the Al Shahot Setano, for taking us out. Adonai,
Yeah.
now God, where did you redeem us from?
Yeah.
From the house of bondage. This is very real stuff. We're following the whole Jewish story. We started by talking about manna. Yes. Now we've gone from the desert into Israel, and when we get to Israel, we go all the way back and think about where we've come from. We were in Egypt.
We're only thanking God for lunch or dinner.
Israel. Sorry, Andrew.
We're only thanking God for lunch or dinner, and we've gone right back to Egypt.
So much of our religion goes back to Egypt.
Yeah, I mean, but it's something that you would think is fairly mundane, but we're actually putting in a much bigger picture.
Well, it's the formation of our people as a nation. So let's go back there. Sorry to the Al Shahot Setanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Eretz
Mitzrayim, Uftives, Abodim.
Be Al Baritacha,
Sasanta Soreno, Valtarasa Kadishimatatanu.
Gary, did you ask us to pause?
I don't want to break the flow. Go. I'll come back.
The Al Baritacha, Shechatamta Biv Sorenu, the Al Toratacha, Shalim Adatanu, the Al Chukecha,
Shechatatanu. Shechanantanu. Malachilas Mazal. Shetazan. Umafanes al sonu tamid b'chol yom. Ubachanes ubachol shoka.
By the way, you see where on the share screen edition, let's take the last line for an example. When you get to this vowel on the second letter, it's long. When you get to the vowel over here on the third letter of the third word, it's also long. This vowel is called a komat, but it's not always long. Sometimes we say avadim. Yes, mi beit avadim. Avadim, you have the same shape. When it's long, it's not a but o. So it's b'chol yom, uv'chol eight, uv'chol sha'a. That last line, just a slightly different pronunciation of a shape at the bottom, the kamat's vowel, which is pretty much the same, but on three occasions on the bottom line, it's longer. And whenever it's longer, you go oh. When it's short, as it is on this final word of the page, it appears on these two letters, and it's short, it's ah, it's sha-ah.
So it's not just a cheshik, it's not just an emphasis, it's an actual new sort of vowel.
Yes, but it's formed from the same shape. One is a short one, and one is a long one. Just wanted to point that out, Gary.
Off, and before you got the call, but you
Yes.
never hear that when people bench.
It's the correct pronunciation. That's the best way to do it.
Right,
Gary.
okay.
I was just feeling the kind of like humor in this as well. Like when you're saying in the last blessing, when you come back and repeat yourself, you know, not only now, but forever. And also here, when we say avadim and we repeat avadim, you know, with like, it's like, you know, slavery. Yes, we said slavery. Am I wrong to think there is humor here, or anyone commented on that?
There is definitely humor. It's not part of the bench. It's just become part. I think this is what we call a summer camp benching. We come from kids dancing on
the summer.
Yeah, we call it benching on a bench. They stand on a bench at summer camp going, it just goes on, kind of fits in, but they don't know necessarily what they're saying. But I'll give you some more humor. On Yom Kippur, we have this song. You know what it means? I've sinned, I'm guilty, we're terrible. Yeah, it's just a way of putting music to some of our words. And at the end of the day, whatever they mean, it lifts us and it focuses us on doing the right thing. So there is some humor, but at the end of the day, it works.
But do we know, like, the avadim repetition, is that constant? That's always been there, or is that something that's like, as people have gone in, they've just repeated it?
It's been made, it's human made. The word avadim does not actually repeat in the word, in the text. There's no repetition of the word avadim. So if I say,
when it started.
no, I think summer camps, honestly. If you sing this without an echo, you would just do Me'eret Mitzrayim U'Kitanu Beit Avadim. You can. There's no word Avadim that appears a second time. Okay, so as we scroll along, we now come to something which was extremely relevant last week, and that is Anhanisim. Very, very interestingly, when we have Rosh Chodesh, when we have a festival, when we have Shabbat, there are additional bits that are added in just before Ubenei Yerushalayim, the blessing of Jerusalem. We also add an additional Harachaman in another section. You know, just before we've got Harachaman, there's a special occasion. We add Harachaman, a blessing for the new year, for the new month, for Shabbat, for a festival. So those are the two sections where we generally add things for a particular occasion. However, when it comes to Hanukkah and Purim, they are not added later on. They're added right now after the second blessing. And that's why it says on Hanukkah, we add this paragraph. Al hanisim v'al hapurkan v'al hagvurot v'al hatshuot v'al hamilchamot sha'asita la'avoteinu v'yamim ha'hezman hazeh. I'm not going to read all of this because it's relevant just once or twice a year. Of course, not only twice, but because Hanukkah's 8 days and you can bench on all of those 8 days. You don't have to, but you could bench. and then with Purim as well. The words I'm happy to go through with anyone individually, but I just wanted to point out where they appear. Hanukkah or Purim, you get in your mind, in your psyche, in your rhythm. After Nodelacha, boom, ala nissen. And it's interesting to note that it comes up here, whereas all the other festivals are mentioned later. Is that okay?
Yeah. Can I just say, if I have to leave to help Jane with the delivery, don't think I've disappeared. I'll be back, but they haven't come yet, so it's no problem.
No worries. And I guess everyone wants us to finish up shortly, just in terms of time, although we can revisit it.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Here we now come to
Now there.
yeah, the Al Hakol. Okay, so we're still, yeah. We've come through Hanukkah and Purim. The Al Hakol, I'm going to read this aloud. The Al Hakol, thank you for everything. That word kol means all, everything. Adonai Eloheinu, anachnu modim lach. That word modim anachnu lach from the Amida. When the Chazan standing up in shul on Shabbat morning and goes, Modim anachnu lach. Same words over here. Modim means thank you. Thank you for everything. Mavarachim otach, yitbarach simcha, mikol chai, tamid olam va'et, kahakatu, v'yachalta, v'savata, v'yachta, al haaretz, Baruch atah Adonai ala haaretz. Right in the middle of this paragraph, we have the whole foundation of benching as per the biblical description I gave earlier. Kakatuv, that word, kakatuv, the achalta v'savata, kakatuv means as it is written. It's a quote from scripture. So kakatuv means it's written in the Torah, v'achalta, you shall eat, v'savata, you shall be satisfied, u'berachta, and you shall bench. And this paragraph over here is essentially laying out why we're doing what we're doing, why we are benching, because it's a biblical command. And there's a direct reference back there. Short, sweet, and to the point on that one. Everyone happy?
Yeah.
I appreciate that it's not the case after one run through now, everyone will be able to fly through it without any, without needing to practice further. But as I said earlier, we're trying to open the gates tonight. I'm very happy to spend more time with anyone else who wants. And I think that once we've navigated and mapped out everything this evening, and also done a bit of a sing through, it's about practice, practice, practice. And I will share those links. Levi has responded to say, yes, I do have the tracks. I can send you a Dropbox or WeTransfer link. So
Okay.
when he sends that through to me, I'll forward it on.
The key is to get familiar with the Hebrew, I think. And I think you can only just all you can do is persevere with that. And then it pay dividends when you actually hear it around the table, I think.
Yes, exactly.
But if you know a bit of the background that we've discussed today, it also it helps to contextualize it.
Yeah.
More familiar. And if you're able to now over the next few weeks prioritize this and say, okay, I'm gonna know the benching. I'm gonna put it in my ears when I'm running, when I've got some free time. You're just gonna listen. I'm sorry about it. You're gonna have to just listen to that voice coming through, but it will become second nature.
Yeah.
So, Rachem, you know what? I'm gonna put a tune to this. Rachem Adonai Eloheinu Al Yisrael Al Yerushalayim Irecha V'yal Tzion Mishkan Kevodecha V'yal Malchut Beit David Mishichecha Al Habayit Hagadol V'Hakadosh Shenikra Shimcha Alav. Now we're already in the middle of the third blessing. It doesn't start with Uvanei Yerushalayim. That's the end of the third blessing. This paragraph is the beginning. We're from Rachem, and we're now already in the middle of that. Eloheinu Avinu Re'enu Zonenu Farnaseinu V'chalkaleinu V'harvicheinu V'harvach lanu Adonai Eloheinu Mehera Mikol Tsaroteinu V'na'al Tatzricheinu Adonai Eloheinu Lo lidei matnat V'lo lidei halavatam Ki im liyadacha hameleya hapatucha hakadosha v'harchava shelo nevosh v'lo nikalem le'olam va'et. If it's Shabbat, we don't go straight to Uvanei Yerushalayim. We pause here and we mention Shabbat. If it's a festival, we would do exactly the same. And if it's Shabbat and a festival, you plug it all in over here. By the way, here's a trivia pursuit question. Which could be the longest benching of the year? And by longest, I mean you're adding in these additional bits and pieces for various occasions.
Right. I think I've got this because I've discussed this with Simon Hochhauser.
Okay.
It would be Hanukkah falling on Shabbos when it's Rosh Chodesh. And you can add, I think you can add in the presence of the Israeli ambassador. I think he said that, but I'm not sure if it was a joke. But it's certainly Hanukkah. It would certainly be on Rosh Chodesh as well, and would certainly be on Shabbos.
Let's break this down. Why would that make it the longest? Because on Hanukkah, we would have already said Al Hanissim.
Yeah, but you add a bit on. There's a Hanukkah bit here to add.
Sorry?
There is a Hanukkah bit here to add, isn't there?
The Al Hanissim is what we already added before. That was my point, that when it comes to Hanukkah and Purim, we don't wait until just before the Neder Yerushalayim to add. We add after Modeh Lacha.
Sorry, you're muted. Like, I didn't hear you.
We've already added the Hanukkah bit before we reach this point.
Yes, I know that. Yes. But
So now
it's
Shabbat.
What makes it the longest benching?
Exactly. We've added for Hanukkah Al Hanissim. We're going to add for Shabbat Ritzei, which is right up on the page on the screen now. And then it's also Rosh Chodesh, and therefore we would add Ya'aleh V'Yavo.
Yeah.
These are big pieces. They come up fairly regularly. I would love to go through them. Al Hanissim is a couple of times a year. This comes up, say, and Ya'aleh V'Yavo every month. But I think for now, I just want to show you where they appear. To go over them at a different time. Let's just continue to get the flow. Okay, there's Ritzei for Shabbat, Eloheinu v'Elahei Avotenu Ya'aleh V'Yavo for Rosh Chodesh. And once we've done those, either or both, we would get to Yerushalayim,
HaKodesh B'Miro B'Yomeinu
Baruch Atah
Adonai Ba'oleh
Rachamav
Rachamav Yerushalayim Amen.
So it'd be interesting to think about what would happen if the fourth blessing hadn't been introduced. I guess we'd go from here maybe to sign off with Oseh Shalom, solemn prayer of peace, and pretty much leave it there. But for the Bar Kochba revolt that I mentioned earlier, this fourth blessing was introduced at Tov Hametiv, and therefore almost sounds like we're starting again. Baruch Atah Adonai. It's the only other blessing that starts with Baruch Atah Adonai.
Oh, right.
All of the others start without a Baruch. They end with a Baruch, possibly, but they don't start with Baruch. This one is like a completely separate section. That's why it also begins with Baruch. It was added on later. Bentching was already in practice before this blessing was added. Does that make sense to everyone? Hey, David, come join us. Okay, so
David.
Let's go with a bit of Baruch over here.
Yay!
Was there some thought as well about beginning with a Baruch and ending with a Baruch as well when they came to put this together, perhaps?
Nice. Yes, it could well be. But I think it's more to do with the fact that it was it just didn't completely fit. They needed to. If you have a bunch of blessings that flow, you don't need to start each one with a baruch. But if they're somewhat separate, as this is, then you need to reintroduce the baruch. But I do like your theme. You start the first blessing and the last blessing with baruch, and that's something I haven't thought of before. The bookends are baruch. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam.
Avinu,
Malkeinu. Adireinu.
Adirenu, Barenu, Galenu, Mitzrayenu, Hashem Kadas Yaakov.
Yaakov. Ra'einu ra'ei Yisrael. Ha'melech ha'tov. Ha'meitiv la'akol. Shebachol yom ve'yom. Meitiv hu
Uyetiv lanu, Hukam lanu, Hakam lenu, Hebreinu, Lo ad.
Again, a bit like we were saying before, it's past tense, present tense, and future tense. Thank you, God. You've just encapsulated all goodness for us at all times. Lechein ulechesed ulerachamim ulerevachat
Hatzara, Hatzlacha, Baracha,
beracha
Yeshua,
nechama parnasa
Hakam.
Verachamim.
Okay. Yeah, I told him I might have to do it.
It's got that long vowel again.
Exactly, there's the long vowel.
Yeah.
Rachaman hu yimloch aleinu liolam.
It's a video, Zoom.
Rachaman hu yitbarach hashemayim va'aretz. I'm on the third line of page 30.
Adao, dao, re, the yes, bawa, bonu, da, netzach, netzachim.
V'yit hadar banu la'ad uli ol.
Yome, ola, bim.
Right under the flag. Harachaman hu yifanaseinu b'chavod. Every time we say harachaman, it's a special request or blessing. Harachaman hu yishbar aleinu mi'al tzavarenu.
Do we all say amen?
You can
People say amen.
You can say amen after each of these, yes. You don't have to.
I find this the most tongue-twisty paragraph.
Which one? The whole lot here. Or the Harachaman hu yishbar aleinu. Which one?
Yeah,
That
this
one.
is the biggest tongue twister of the lot, this lot.
Okay, let's do this one again then in the middle. Harachaman hu yishbar aleinu me'al tzavarenu. Hu yolichenu komimiyot li'artseinu. Taking us out of exile and the yoke tzavarenu on our necks. Hu yolichenu komimiyot li'artseinu. You'll take us back to our land. Of course, we have Israel today, but in terms of the fulfillment of the biblical dream, this is what the particular verse over here is referring to. Harachaman hu yishlach bracha meruba b'bayit hazeh. Thank you for b'bayit hazeh on this house. V'al shulchan zeh, and on this table.
You like this, don't you?
And now, let's invite Elijah. Harachaman hu yishlach lanu
Et halavi.
Vivaselanu.
Sarah's Tabas, Yeshua, Melech Lomaus.
Nine, 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 nine. Appreciate that we're moving at a pace now, just to get to the end. Interesting bit on page 32. Who do you bless? A whole bunch of options. Rachaman hu yivarech at the top is about blessing. Now, if you're eating with other people, then you want to bless the first line at kol hamasubin kan. Everyone who's here with us, everyone who's joining in this meal. Oti, please God bless me, ve'et ishti, if it's relevant. My wife, ve'et ba'ali, a woman blesses her husband. Et avi mori, my father. Imi moroti, my mother. Ve'et zari, my offspring. Ve'et kol asher li, everything I have. So you don't have to necessarily say all of these, but there are options of saying, God, please can you bless these various important people in my life.
So on mine, it's all in a different order, but you can say it whatever order you want.
Yeah. Again, just follow the order of the bencher that you're using. And if you want to order this one from Tribe, it will be very useful. It's laid out nicely. If you're a guest at someone else's table, then as the guest, you bless your host. If you're not a guest at someone else's table, you don't bless your host.
So what's the etiquette? Do you start with your host if you're?
Not necessarily. I think generally it's understood that charity starts at home. Even if you're in someone else's home, you bless your own family and then you bless your guest. But if your bencher has the guest blessing the host first, then by all means go for it. And this is the interesting thing. These are not completely set in stone. This is no longer part of those 4 blessings. These are additional bits that were added. As important, but a bit more flexible in the way that they are, they're not prescriptive.
Sorry, are they all said at the same time, or does one person say something and then the next person says something?
Good question. It's one person saying all of this.
Sorry, not one person for everyone. Well, whatever you want to say, you say at the same time.
Exactly. Thanks for that clarification, Edward. But also, what you may have is a host blessing their guests, and then the guest blesses the host. So you may have a little bit of interaction there. But otherwise, it's you saying whatever you like. There's an interesting as well.
Mine starts with Balat, like the woman who is the owner of this house.
Yeah. Bal habayit hazeh.
Balat.
Yeah. It's important to bless both.
Firstly, shall I talk to me?
Hang on, we're just finishing benching the house. Thanks for coming to visit us. There's an interesting question about parents who, a grown-up child who's no longer living in their parents' house. The person whose parents have unfortunately passed on. Do we still bless them? And there are various views on this. But certainly one can, and some would say one should. We never stop blessing our parents. Even when we move out and have our own families, and even when their souls are up in heaven, we still feel connected and we bless them.
So one might say that then. One might add that.
Yeah.
And so why don't also to me?
Hang on. Yes. So this is definitely a good time to bless one's family, whoever and wherever they are. Interesting over here, just to see as well the range of what can be said and when you would say it. Okay?
I'm looking at the English translation. It says, my honored father, and then in brackets, the man of this house. So obviously leave that out if he's passed away.
Again, some do, some don't. So in my tradition, I follow a particular version of the benching from the Kabbalist, known as Isaac Luria. He's known as the Arizal. And he says we just stick to the script. So every week I bless my parents who run this house. People whose parents are no longer alive could say exactly the same thing. And on the one hand, one could see that as not necessarily being true. On the other hand, how did we get here?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the whole concept of benching. It's all about acknowledgement. It's about saying thank you and appreciating the food chain and our support chain and the chain, the chain and the journey of our lives.
Partnership. They think it's a partnership between parents and God.
Yeah.
Firstly, shall I talk to me?
So there are a whole bunch of blessings. And then when we're ready to wrap up, we move to page 34, coming to the end here. Otanu v'et kol asher lanu. So this is regardless of what you have or have. on page 33. It brings everyone back together. And by the way, when you're leading the benching, there's a bit of a rhythm. It takes some time to get used to the words and the cup, as we were demonstrating earlier. But once you're familiar with all of that, it's also about being able to bring in the participants. And here's a key point. When they hear you say that, they think, he's bringing us back together. This one's been blessing his parent. This one's been blessing their child. This one's been blessing the host, and this one's been blessing the guest. Now we all come back together. So I think, Gary, you asked me before, would there be different people saying different things? And I said, it's one person saying all of it to themselves, and Edward clarified what that means. But as I then also said, you may have people performing different roles. One is a host who blesses their guest, and another is a guest who blesses the host. So you could have different people saying different parts over here. You don't have to. Yes. If there are various people doing different bits, at least this is now where you all come back together. It's important for the leader to be dominant enough to raise the voice and to work with your eyes, to give a smile, to wave your arms. Come on, everyone. You're not saying come on, everyone, but that's what you're illustrating. And everyone comes back in. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. You're now all back on one page, back on the track. Bakol mikol kol, ken yevarech otanu kulanu yachad, b'bracha shelema v'nomah amen. This way the leader makes sure that it's not disjointed, that we're now all together again for the last bit. Ba, is this your favorite bit?
The horses.
Okay, you're going to show them the horse actions. Now, here we go.
I'm going to do them.
Sure, you do the galloping horses. 1, 2, 3. One final bit where we would add, for a special occasion, we would add a harachaman. Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, Yom Tov. You would add in something before you go on to, you'd go, yeah, Sukkot, well done. You would add over there as well. Before you go to Mashiach, you would add in the harachaman for a particular occasion. By the way, I should also mention, not for this session, but so that you're aware, if you're at a circumcision, there's a special blessing for the Brit Milah with a whole bunch of harachamans, which come up slightly earlier than this, but there's like a whole range of them. Whereas most of these occasions just have one, some have two as a maximum. A Brit Milah is the one occasion where we have several harachamans for the baby, for the parents, for the mohel, for the sandik who held the baby, and so on and so forth. Everyone gets their harachaman. So on page 38, Harachamanu Yizakenu Limas
HaMashiach O Chaye Ha'olam Haba.
Magdil, or if it's Shabbat or Yom Tov, we don't say Magdil, we say Migdal, and that's pointed out.
That's what we say.
Malkovi Osech
Shalom Himamov Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Yalkol Yisrael Piemaru Amen.
Last page. Adonai lo yachzeru chato.
How to the down like Kita Okili Aulam Hasto.
Umaskia
I want so Baruch Hagever Shev Takano Adonai Mitacho Naisi Ganti Lo Isi Zadik Nezo
Mevakesh lachem
Adonai Yamoiten Adonai Yavarech
Amova
Shalom.
And it's at this point the host said, "Oh, it's lovely. It's been lovely to have you all here." And then the guests have to say, "Oh, we better go then."
Before the lights go off. I apologise that we've gone on.
Diplomatic way of saying, "Get out my house now. We're tired."
We've gone on for at least 18 minutes longer than anticipated, but I didn't actually realise that you would want to sing the whole thing through. I'm delighted. I hope it's been helpful.
Right.
I appreciate that it hasn't been a full deal and somewhat frustrating because we're not there yet, but hopefully it's opened up as much as possible. And hey presto, in the chat right now, there is a Dropbox link from Levi with the full recordings of Bentching.